Bill Trebelov stood frozen and helpless, watching his beloved wife snuggle warmly into the arms of their next-door neighbor, Roger. Emily smiled so brightly, she seemed to illuminate from within. She wore a flimsy yellow sundress that left little to the imagination. Her shapely body fit perfectly in Roger's embrace, as if they were two pieces of a puzzle. They were laughing, surrounded by friends and neighbors with familiar, yet strangely indistinguishable, faces. Roger whispered something into Emily's ear, and it made her giggle like a little girl. She gave him a playful slap on his shoulder, and then raised herself on the tips of her toes to give him a kiss. Bill opened his mouth to scream, but no words escaped. He struggled to breathe. It felt as though he were underwater. He began to panic, and could feel his chest tighten and his pulse race. Roger looked right into his eyes and acknowledged his presence with a wicked smile. He winked and kissed Emily again, right there in front of all their friends and neighbors. This time, as he kissed her, his tongue protruded awkwardly from his mouth and his hands boldly explored her body. He lifted the hem of Emily's dress, exposing her bare skin to the warm summer air, and squeezed her firm cheek with his finely manicured hands. She responded with a playful CO and returned his kiss with enthusiasm. Roger broke from their kiss and directed his eyes toward Bill once again. This time, his smile contorted into laughter. He pointed a finger at Bill, and all heads turned to follow the path of his direction. The surrounding audience erupted into raucous laughter. Several laughed so hard they spilled their drinks. Even Emily failed to hide her laughter behind her dainty hand. Bill followed the gaze of the crowd and lowered his head. He was naked, completely naked. He awoke, wild-eyed and gasping for air. He turned to the table beside his bed, and the alarm sounded at that exact moment. He shut it off and turned to the other side of the bed. Just as it had been every morning for the past 3 years, it was empty. At first, Emily thought it was just the flu. She began vomiting and couldn't keep down any food or liquid. Then the constipation began, and that led to bloating and unbearable stomach pain. When Bill found her curled up in a fetal position on their bathroom floor one evening, that's when he finally insisted she go to the emergency room and have someone look at her. When the doctors ordered an ultrasound, the first thought that popped into Bill's mind was that she was pregnant. "I don't want another kid," he thought. "We finally got the other 2 out of the house. I'm too old to start over again." In the years to come, he would spend countless lonely nights reflecting on the selfishness of that thought and berating himself for having it. There's no reason to panic. The doctor assured them, but the expression on his face indicated otherwise. The doctor described a suspicious area on Emily's ovaries and explained that a laparoscopy would be needed to get a better view of the area. Although his insides churned with concern, Bill maintained a calm demeanor and insisted there was no reason to worry. "We'll get through this," he assured her, gently stroking her hand as she waited to be wheeled away for her procedure. "No matter whatever happens to us, we get through it. Remember when Janie got sick? We thought we'd lose her forever. But we didn't. We got through it together. Remember when we first got married? We lived in that shitty little apartment in that run-down neighborhood." Emily gave him a brave smile. "We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And then I made things worse by getting pregnant. Yes, well, I suppose I had something to do with that, too." He responded with a smile. "And you worried that we wouldn't have enough money to raise a child. But I told you it would be okay. I told you I was taking classes at night, and I'd make enough money that you wouldn't need to work and could stay home and raise our baby. Eventually, I'd make enough money that we could move into a nicer place. And we did," she said, gripping his hand and looking at him through glistening eyes. "You worked so hard and provided for our family so well. I couldn't have asked for a better husband and father for our children. Well, don't talk as if it's over. There is still a lot more we need to do. I'm scared, Bill. I'm scared too, Em. But we will get through this, I promise." While Emily lay in the recovery room after surgery, her doctor marched into the waiting room, wearing that same serious expression Bill had seen before. "A growth was found," the doctor explained, "and a sample was taken. The results would be known shortly, and there was still hope that it was benign." Given her symptoms, however, The doctor added bluntly, "You should prepare yourselves for the worst." Bill plodded down the hallway toward the recovery room, the floor barely perceptible beneath his feet and the walls growing hazy and colorless. The emotion overwhelmed him so suddenly he wasn't prepared for it. He quickly made a detour to the nearest restroom, entered the stall furthest from the entrance, locked the door, and collapsed to the floor. He had been taught to believe that real men don't cry, but for the first time in his adult life he wept like a baby. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4. It seemed like an impossible diagnosis. A cruel prank. Only days before she was admitted to the hospital, Emily was as happy and healthy as she had ever been. How could she have become so ill in such a short period of time? Bill refused to accept the diagnosis. He told his wife they would seek a second opinion. If that opinion was the same, then they would seek a third and a fourth. No matter how many doctors it would take, they would find someone with the courage to deliver a more optimistic diagnosis. "Bill, I love you," Emily said, smiling sweetly. "But honey, you need to face the truth. This is happening, and there is nothing you or I can do to stop it." "Bullshit," he said. He could feel the anger bubbling toward the surface. "Honey, I'm so sorry to put you through this." He looked at her with amazement. Here she was going through this incomprehensible moment, staring into the darkened depths of her own mortality, and her main concern was with him. Over the next several months, he would continue to be amazed at the strength and character of this woman. Together, they decided that she would undergo chemotherapy treatment in order to prolong her life as much as possible. Bill was never much of a caregiver and avoided being near sick people as much as possible. With no other choice, however, he quickly learned to become a top-notch nurse. He helped her in and out of bed, took her to the bathroom, and cleaned the vomit from the bucket she kept at her bedside. Toward the end, he learned to clean her drainage tube and switch out her IV bags. The end came more swiftly than he expected. They were watching television one evening. Emily was lying in her makeshift hospital bed, which Bill had relocated to the living room at her request. Suddenly, he sensed that something had changed. He looked at her, and she seemed more calm and peaceful than usual. He hesitantly moved to her bedside and took her hand in his, taking care not to squeeze too hard. She didn't move a muscle. Fighting back the tears welling in his eyes, he placed a couple of fingers along the main artery on her neck. There was no pulse. The years passed in a hazy fog. Friends and family visited often at first, but those visits grew less and less frequent over time. The kids both lived out of state, but they called often to check in on him. Bill kept himself busy around the house, repairing all of the items that went neglected while he cared for Emily. He found that as long as he kept his mind busy, he could avoid thinking of her. It wasn't that he didn't want to think of her, but he found that when he did, it would incapacitate him for hours. As time passed, he learned to control it a little better and focus on the fond memories instead of the horror of her last remaining weeks. During the day, it was easy to keep his mind occupied on work or with various projects around the house. At night, he was alone with his thoughts. Most nights, he would simply cry himself to sleep. It got to the point where he dreaded going to bed, and he found himself staying up later and later and getting less and less sleep. It was during one of those sleepless nights, lying in bed with his eyes wide open, staring at the black ceiling overhead, that his life, or at least the perception of his life, changed forever. He was thinking about an email that Emily had written to him years ago. It was sweet and romantic, and it filled his heart with overwhelming joy when he read it. He gained a better understanding of how much he meant to his wife, and how much she loved him with all her heart. He would give anything to read those words again, he thought. Dispensing with the charade of trying to sleep, he rose from the bed and walked into his office to retrieve his laptop. He scrolled through his email inbox to the very bottom and confirmed his fear that he had deleted all of his older emails. He pounded the desk with his fist and sighed. Then a thought came to him, and he switched over to Emily's email account. She was always very meticulous about keeping a tidy email account, and it drove him crazy at times, because she would often delete emails that he felt she should keep. But she wasn't computer savvy enough to know that her deleted emails weren't actually deleted until she cleared them from the recycle bin. Sure enough, As he scrolled through the deleted folder of her account, he found messages from several years in the past. He remembered the email she sent to him was written roughly 5 years earlier, and he examined the messages from that year, one by one. He paused when he discovered a message from their next-door neighbor, Roger. It was titled, "About last night," and it was dated July 5th. He seemed to recall attending a neighborhood Independence Day barbecue that year. In fact, it was the last year he and Emily went to that annual event. With a curious expression, Bill clicked on the email and it popped open. "Hi, Emily. I just want to say that I really enjoyed last night. I've been wanting to do that for years. It's a shame we were interrupted. If you ever want to finish what we started, you know where I live. Roger. P.S. Don't worry about Phil. I had a chat with him, and he's not going to tell anyone." What the fuck? Bill muttered to himself. What was Roger referring to? What was it that he enjoyed doing which he had wanted to do for years? What did he mean by finish what we started, and what did Phil have to do with it? Bill had never considered the remote possibility that Emily had ever been unfaithful during any of their 25 years together. She was as devoted as anyone he knew. Sure, they went through a bit of a rough patch, as every married couple does, but their relationship was rock solid. Then again, he remembered Emily was drinking heavily that night. She wasn't normally a drinker, but on that particular night, some of the neighbors brought a homemade concoction that Emily found irresistible, and she went a little overboard. When she suggested they make other plans for Independence Day in the years that followed, he assumed she was embarrassed about being so drunk in front of the neighbors. But maybe there was another reason. He briefly searched for a response to that email or any other emails from Roger, but found nothing. He shut down the email program, and the desktop wallpaper portrayed the smiling face of his beautiful wife on her 30th birthday. He stared at the photo with a fresh perspective. Was it possible she wasn't the loving and faithful wife he thought she was? That was the night the recurring nightmare began. The following morning, Bill stood at his front window, sipping coffee. He peered across the street to the house where Roger and Chelsea lived with their 2 young children. Their house was the largest in the neighborhood, and the front lawn was immaculate. A black Lexus, sparkling clean as always, was parked in the driveway. Bill never cared for Roger, from the very first day he moved into the neighborhood. Roger was a trial lawyer in Philadelphia, and apparently a very successful one. He was the kind of guy who pretended to be humble, while at the same time taking every opportunity to let you know that he was better than you in every way. He was more handsome, fit, made more money, took better vacations, owned a nicer house and a nicer car, and married a more beautiful woman. His wife, Chelsea, was a typical trophy wife. She was several years younger, with long blonde hair, a noticeable tan, and enhanced features. Practically everyone in the neighborhood suspected that Roger habitually cheated on her, but she was too stupid to realize it. Their kids were spoiled rotten, and were handed everything they ever wanted. The plan was to sip his coffee and watch for Roger to leave the house. Bill would confront him with the email, and if the suspicions were true, knock out a few of the asshole's pearly white teeth. As he sipped his coffee, though, the holes in that plan became evident. Roger would simply deny any wrongdoing. The email was vague enough that it could be interpreted any number of ways, and he was skilled enough with words to spin it any way he chose. Even if he confessed, and Bill knocked him out, Roger would sue him in a heartbeat, and the prick would own 2 homes in the neighborhood. Bill finished the last of his coffee just as Roger emerged from his front door, wearing an expensive-looking suit. He strutted to his Lexus, slid behind the wheel, and backed out of the driveway. Bill followed the path of the car as it sped down the road and noticed Phil standing in his front yard, watering his plants. "That's the ticket," Bill muttered under his breath. Adrenaline surged through his veins as he quickly strode toward Phil's house. Phil turned just as Bill reached his driveway, and he smiled and waved. His smile faded, though, when he noticed the expression on Bill's face. "Everything all right, Bill?" Phil asked. "No, not really," Bill responded. "I have a question for you." "Well, okay," Phil said hesitantly. "Shoot. Why didn't you tell me Roger was with my wife?" All of the blood from Phil's face faded to white, and his jaw dropped open. He took a step backward and nearly stumbled over his hedge. "Bill, I didn't want to stir up any trouble, that is all. When did you find out? Just now, Bill said. Oh, shit, Phil said, lowering his head. I'm sorry, Bill. Why don't you tell me what happened? Bill asked. The rage within him caused his muscles to quake. Listen, Bill, it was a long time ago. And Emily, she's gone now. There's no need to dig up. Bill took a step toward Phil. His eyes bore a hole straight through him, and he jabbed his finger toward his face. Tell me what happened, right now. Okay, fine, Phil said, raising his hands in defense. But I really think you're making a mistake digging this up. Bill stood motionless and patiently waited while Phil took a deep breath and shifted nervously. He looked as if he were about to puke. It was at that 4th of July party, a few years ago. He began. You remember that it was at that house at the other end of the block? Well, I didn't want to walk all that way, so I drove there. Later that night, I went out to get something from my car, and that's when I saw some movement in Roger's car. What did you see, Phil? I wasn't sure at first, but as I got closer, I heard noises too. I looked through the back window, and that's when I saw them. Roger and Emily. What were they doing, Phil? Bill asked. The veins in his forehead protruded, and his eyes burned. Come on, man. You know what they were doing. I'm not going to spell it out. I need to hear the words, Phil. They were together. Phil said a little too loudly. He quickly scanned his surroundings and then spoke more softly. She was kind of lying on the back seat, and he was on top. You know. Bill's hands involuntarily formed into tight fists, and he felt a compulsion to punch the nearest object. Phil must have read his mind. Hey man, you asked for this? Phil said, still raising his hands. I didn't want to tell you. Yeah, some friend you are. Bill spat. You've been keeping this secret from me for 5 years. I didn't think it would do anyone any good. It's not my business to get involved. I know that Roger had a little chat with you afterward. Let me guess, did he offer you free services from his law office in exchange for your silence? Jesus, Bill. What kind of person do you think I am? You know what, Phil? Bill said, backing away. I don't know. I don't know what kind of person anyone is anymore. Emily dropped to her knees and ran her hands down Roger's khaki shorts. She started kissing him intimately in public. She smiled and cooed at him. She purred, "Is this all for me?" While Emily continued bobbing her head along his stiff and massive pole, Roger raised an imported beer in Bill's direction and nodded. The other neighbors turned to face him, all wearing the same devious grins. The nightmares always ended the same way, with the neighbors all laughing and pointing at Bill as he stood naked and frozen on the spot. How many of the neighbors were in on this secret? How many of them were laughing at him behind his back, just as they did in the dream? Everything he thought he knew about his wife and his marriage was a lie. She was nothing but an unfaithful woman, and their marriage was a complete sham. That sappy letter she wrote to him, which he cherished all those years, was simply a guilty confession. How could she possibly love him so deeply and value their marriage so greatly if she could spread her legs for an asshat like Roger? How many others did she spread her legs for? Bill stared at the house across the street with its pristine lawn. Of course, Roger had nothing to do with the state of that lawn. He hired someone to cut it and fertilize it. The man never did a single hard day's labor in his entire life. How righteous would it be to go over there right now and dump a load of rock salt onto that lawn? Maybe spell out the word cheater in giant letters, so that everyone in the neighborhood would know who that sack of crap really is. The white-hot rage erupted within him. He picked up the nearest object aptly enough, a picture frame with a photo of Emily, and hurled it against a wall, shattering it into shards of debris. He looked around the room for something else to throw, and was disgusted to see photos and reminders of Emily everywhere. He stormed down to the basement and emerged with a large container, which he filled with every item he found that reminded him of her. He shoved the container into the closet and slammed the door shut. Breathing heavily, he sunk into his favorite recliner and cracked open a beer. Revenge had replaced grief as his newest all-consuming obsession. Roger could simply not be allowed to get away with what he did. He deserved punishment, and Bill would be the one to deliver it. Roger needed to know what it felt like to be humiliated. He needed to suffer loss as Bill had. He deserved to lose his wife, his house, his kids, and his beloved car. Everything that mattered to him needed to be ripped away from him. It took several days for Bill to devise a plan. It took several more to find just the right woman to execute this plan. Once he found her, he met her at a coffee shop to ensure that she was the right fit and that she was willing and able to follow orders. Money was no object, and he paid her handsomely. After days of planning, the day of reckoning finally arrived. His heart beating rapidly, Bill knocked on the door across the street. Chelsea answered, looking perplexed. "Everything okay?" she asked sweetly. "Everything is fine," Bill said, "but I need you to come with me. There is something I need to show you." "What is it?" she asked, looking worried. "It's something of great importance to you," he explained. "That's all I can say right now. Just come with me, please." She continued to interrogate him as they drove the short distance to the country club, but Bill was steadfast in his refusal to answer her questions. He almost felt sorry for her. However, she deserved to know the truth as much as he did. He pulled into the parking lot of the country club, and Chelsea suddenly looked panic-stricken. "Why are we here?" she asked. "Is something wrong with Roger? You know he's playing golf here today." "Yes, I know," Bill responded calmly. He looked at the time on the dashboard. "Come with me," he said, exiting the car. He led her on foot around the side of the country club and through a short path through a wooded area to an adjacent lot. It was empty with the exception of one lone car parked at the furthest end. "That looks like our Lexus," Chelsea stated. "Why is it parked way over there?" "Let's have a look," Bill said, doing his best to suppress a smile. As they approached the car, Bill slowed his pace, allowing Chelsea to move ahead of him. He reached into his pocket and extracted his cell phone, swiping it to switch to its camera, and then swiping again to switch to video mode. What was about to happen would be so righteous that he knew he would want to relive it again and again. Chelsea approached the car with apprehension. When she was close enough to see what was happening in the back seat, she gasped loudly, and her hands covered her mouth. She stood for a moment, frozen on the spot. Then she lunged toward the handle of the back door and swung it open with force. "You terrible jerk," she screamed. She leaned into the back seat and pounded her fists into Roger's torso while he raised his arms in defense. She continued to shout and punch, and then emerged from the back seat with a handful of clothing. She slammed the door with a kick of her foot. Her face was streaked with makeup, and her normally perfect hair was a tangled mess. Roger emerged from the other side of the car and looked around furtively before he scurried around the back of the car. "Give me my clothes," he shouted at his wife. He was completely naked, and his hands covered his private parts. "Forget you," Chelsea shouted, and she ran around to the front of the car, still holding the bundle of clothes. "I'm not joking, Chelsea," he screamed. "Give me my clothes." "Forget you," she shouted once again. He chased her around the car for 2 laps while the half-dressed woman in the back seat quietly slipped away and ran toward Bill. Roger stopped on the passenger side of the car, and Chelsea glared at him over the roof. "Chelsea, please give me my clothes," Roger said in a calm voice, "and we can talk about this." With one swift move, she opened the door, tossed the clothing inside, and slid behind the wheel. She locked the doors before Roger had a chance to grab the handle. She looked at her husband with mascara staining her cheeks, thrust her middle finger in the air, and drove away with the tires squealing against the pavement. Roger stood in the middle of the parking lot, wearing only a dumbstruck expression. "Chelsea, you nasty woman. Get back here," he screamed in a high-pitched voice and hopping up and down with one of his hands still covering his genitals. For the first time, Roger seemed to notice Bill. It took him a moment to process who it was and another moment to realize that he was being recorded. "Bill, what are you doing here?" he asked. "Turn that off. In fact, just give me the phone." He thrust his hand out, as if he were a school teacher demanding her student to spit out his gum. "You're crazy if you think I'm giving you my phone." Bill laughed. "Give me the phone," Roger screamed in the same high-pitched tone. He took a few steps toward Bill. "I'm telling you right now," Bill said, pressing a button on the phone and placing it in his pocket. If you take another step toward me, I will knock you the out." Roger stopped in his tracks. He looked past Bill to the woman hiding behind him. He appeared to be gripped with panic and confusion, and his eyes welled with tears. "Why?" Roger asked. "You know goddamn well why," Bill said. He took the woman by the hand and led her back to the main parking lot. Roger remained frozen on the spot and stared into the distance. "Here's the other half," Bill said, handing a thick envelope to the woman once they reached his car. As agreed. "Thanks," she said. "I have to say, that was way easier than I thought it would be." "Seducing him, you mean?" "Yeah," she said, adjusting her top. "Don't get me wrong, I've never had any trouble picking up men." "Well, you're his type," Bill stated matter-of-factly. "And how do you know that?" she asked, playfully. Bill turned to her. "You look a lot like my wife." "Oh," she replied quietly. "I guess you also knew he wouldn't hesitate to make out in his car, then." "He's a predictable guy," Bill said with a chuckle. "He seems to have an unhealthy fetish for that car." "So, I guess it went the way you expected." "Better. Much better than I ever could have expected." "Thank you." They drove in silence for a moment. She smiled. "Okay, but how did you know that he would cheat on his wife?" "Another easy one," he responded. "Once a cheater, always a cheater." When Bill arrived back home, he cracked open a beer and watched the video from his phone over and over again, laughing until his belly ached. A furry orange cat purred at his feet. "Felix," he said, giving the cat a scratch behind the ears. "I haven't laughed this hard in ages." If only he could share this video with the world, he thought. He took another gulp of beer and nearly choked on it. "Felix," he said with a wide smile, "we're not done making this guy pay for what he did." He leaped up the stairs and made a beeline to his office. He fired up the laptop and connected his phone. He created a YouTube account, and within minutes, his video was uploaded for the world to see. He giggled uncontrollably as he captioned it with the title, "Wife Catches Husband Cheating, Hilarity Ensues." Incredibly, within a week, the video had gone viral with more than 400,000 views. A week later, it had exceeded more than 2 million. Bill's friends on Facebook were sharing the video, clueless to the fact that Bill was the one who uploaded it. When the television show Tosh picked it up, the video went mega viral, exceeding more than 100 million views. News vans began showing up across the street from Bill's house. One reporter even showed up at Bill's door once, asking about the whereabouts of his neighbors. People began creating parody videos, mocking Roger's high-pitched voice and setting it to music. One of those videos went viral as well, fueling the phenomenon even further. Roger was forced to resign from his law firm. He had become far too infamous and recognizable for any jury to take him seriously. Chelsea filed for divorce soon thereafter. She ended up with the house, the kids, and in a delightfully righteous twist, the car. The rumor around the neighborhood was that she took a sledgehammer to the car and then sold it for scraps. Bill watched it all unfold with bemused detachment. Justice had been served, and he had no regrets about what he had done. He and Roger were now even, as far as he was concerned. Still, he felt a cold and bitter emptiness inside of him. He wasn't sure why he still felt that way until the day he heard a knock at his door. It was a cold winter day, and he had just thrown a log onto the fire when he heard the unexpected visitor at his door. When he opened the door, he was shocked to see Marilyn standing there. She was Emily's best friend, dating all the way back to grade school. He hadn't seen her since the funeral. "Marilyn," he said, standing in the doorway with a look of confusion. "What are you doing here?" "Hi, Bill," she said with an uncomfortable smile. "Can I come in?" "Of course," he said. They shared an awkward moment of hesitation and then hugged each other. He led her to the chairs in front of the fireplace. "Can I get you anything to drink?" "No, thanks," she said. "I won't be staying long." He stared into her eyes, perplexed. "What can I do for you?" "Well," she said, "I saw the video online." She motioned toward Roger's old house across the street. "I'm pretty sure the whole world has seen that video." Bill laughed. "I have a hunch that it was you who posted it," she stated. "Really?" he said, bemused. I just have a hunch, that's all, she interrupted. I talked to Phil. She let the words sink in and stared at him meaningfully. Bill shifted in his chair, uncomfortably. Did you? He said. His expression was stone cold. He told me that, you know? She continued. And I'm here because I made a promise to Emily. I made this promise just before she passed. She told me that if you ever find out what happened, to give you this. Bill watched intently as Marilyn reached into her coat pocket and produced an envelope. The word Bill was written on it, in Emily's handwriting. Marilyn handed it to him, and he stared at it, emotionless. Several moments passed, and neither one of them moved a muscle. Only the crackling of the fireplace and the ticking of a clock could be heard. Without warning, Bill tossed the envelope into the fire. Emily leaped from her chair and attempted to retrieve it, but Bill grabbed her by the arm. "What did you do?" she shouted, wide-eyed and mouth gaping. "Now we're even," he stated calmly. "Your dying wife wrote you that letter," she said. "How could you just throw it away like that? What do you mean you're even?" "I never got a chance to confront her," he stated in the same calm tone. "And now she will never get a chance to explain. But you have to hear her side of the story." "Forget her side of the story," he shouted, causing Marilyn to recoil. What could she possibly say to explain herself? "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It meant nothing to me. It was just a mistake. I was drunk." "Yeah, well, fuck her." Marilyn sat in silence for a moment, stunned. She stared at him as he paced the room. "She never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. "You were the love of her life. You know that." "I don't know anything anymore," he shouted. "It was all a lie. Our entire marriage was a lie." "No, it wasn't," Marilyn yelled, standing to her feet. "She loved you, damn it. And yeah, it was a mistake. Humans make mistakes, Bill. She had too much to drink. She wasn't thinking clearly, and she made a mistake. That one mistake doesn't mean your entire marriage was a sham, and it doesn't mean she never loved you." "Yeah, well, to me it does," I replied. Marilyn stared at him, but he refused to look at her. She looked around the room and saw empty shelves and tables where family photos once stood. She shook her head and sighed. "Bill, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen at last." He looked at her. His eyes welled with tears, and he swallowed hard. "Forgiveness isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It isn't about the person who wronged you. It's about you. It isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about allowing yourself the freedom to put your past aside and move on with your life." He stood, silent and still, trying desperately not to cry. She approached him softly and embraced him, squeezing him tightly. She then moved toward the door and showed herself out. It was springtime when Bill heard that knock at his door once again. Marilyn stood on the front porch, smiling curiously. "Going somewhere?" she asked, motioning toward the moving truck in the driveway. A sign on the front lawn announced that the property had been sold. "Just packing up the last of it," Bill said with a smile. "Come on in. It looks like I caught you just in time," she noted, motioning toward the mostly empty house. "I just happened to be in the neighborhood and saw the sign and moving van and put two and two together. You should have been a detective," he teased. She responded with a smile. "I'm packing up room by room, and this is the last one. Need any help?" she offered. "No, but thank you. I think I can manage it." "So, where are you heading?" "Florida," he said. "Time to get away from the cold. There's a retirement village where the ratio of women to men is nearly 2 to 1. I like those odds." He flashed her a devilish grin. She scanned the room and paused when she noticed the photo on the end table. It showed Bill and Emily, smiling happily and looking healthy and young. "Well, I'm glad to see that you're moving on," she said with a smile. "I'm happy for you." "Thank you, Marilyn. I decided to follow the advice of a dear old friend." And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.